Good morning. I'm Fenwick Huss, Dean of the Zicklin School of Business, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. In this series, we're examining the effects of the pandemic on business. Today, we have a very interesting story of an entrepreneur's innovative response by pivoting from the manufacture of luxury items in the fashion industry to a major supplier of PPE, medical grade garments for healthcare. Joining me today from the Dean's office is Gwen Webb, who will moderate the Q&A. Our entrepreneur is Michelle Feinberg from New York Embroidery Studio. Also joining us is Scott Newbert, who is the Field Center Chair in Entrepreneurship in the Zicklin School of Business. And moderating our conversation is Larry Zicklin, former chairman of Neuberger Berman, an alum of the school and the school's benefactor. And Larry is also a professor in our undergraduate honors program. Welcome everyone. Larry.
Thank you very much, Fenwick. Michelle, it's an absolute pleasure
Morning.
to do this with you. I'm going to dispense with the usual formalities of where you grew up and who your third grade teacher was, because I think the story is much more interesting than that. So let me begin by asking you, what was your business like prior to the pandemic? What did you do? Who did you do it for?
Prior to the pandemic, I catered to the high-end fashion trade. So runway, Met Gala, New York designers, pretty much anybody who wanted to develop products here and see something quick, I worked with. So pretty much every designer that's based in New York City.
And these were things that designers couldn't do themselves or chose not to do themselves?
Correct. These are specialty manufacturing items, from embroidery, nail heads, rhinestones, pleating, smocking, shirring, laser cutting, digital printing, UV printing, special novelty things that manufacturers don't do.
And I assume you had lots of equipment that enabled you to do all this.
Correct. I've been a 6-time winner of the Fashion Manufacturing Initiative, and thanks to the EDC and their support and people like Sonia Park, I've been able to invest in the latest and greatest technology in fashion manufacturing. All different types of equipment, which enabled me to have, ultrasonic welding and some of the specialty machines that are required to manufacture PPE.
Is this equipment made in the United States?
Some yes, some no. We use a lot of lasers. I have lasers that are made here, German parts, and I have other machines that are imported.
And I just want to get an idea of the size of your business. I don't mean in dollars, but the number of employees, the number of square feet you had of manufacturing.
Pre-pandemic, 50 people, 10,000 square feet.
And it was all on the west side of Manhattan on 26th Street.
Correct.
And did you have relationships at that point with other factories in the area, or was this just yours?
Sure. I mean, being on the block for 30 years, I've established, long-term working relationships with all of the factories in the neighborhood. Many of the people in my building, we share information, technology, help each other, and work together.
I, of course, am old enough to remember when that whole area was full of garment manufacturers. And as someone that went to Baruch College,
right.
I used to go there after school to work there.
I've seen it evolve in 30 years and change. I've seen the mass exodus, and I've spent a big portion of my career in China, and I've learned a lot from that side too. So I have the benefit of both manufacturing here and also knowing what's available in China.
So Michelle, a day comes when the pandemic hits. We start to get word of it. Mm-hmm. What's the first time it starts to affect you, and how does that come about?
Well, one of my closest friends who's a physician was the first person I know to get COVID. And, our country, New York, needs PPE. And I know that we have the ability to help, and we can start manufacturing right away.
And I'm assuming when the pandemic hit, your building was either closed or threatened to be closed.
That's correct. We were shut down, but I was already working with the EDC at that point, and I was the first business listed as a necessary, essential business for New York. So I did get to force my building open.
And EEC is an acronym for what?
The Economic Development Corporation
Okay.
of New York. They were one of the first gown manufacturers in New York.
And you started working with them before the business, before the building was being shut down. What prompted that?
I did. Well, my longstanding relationship with the EDC and what they've done for manufacturing and the Fashion Manufacturing Initiative in New York put us in contact, and hey, the city needed PPE, and we were all going to work together to try to get the city the PPE that it needed.
So this was strictly a relationship with the city.
Yes, it was.
And had you worked with the city before the pandemic?
I have. I've been working with the EDC for several years with the Fashion Manufacturing Initiative with the CFDA.
And
they've opened the grants for the equipment to invest in manufacturing.
And when the pandemic hits full tilt and you realize the necessity for PPE equipment,
right.
What is your first relationship with the federal government?
Well, I started reaching out so now I'm making gowns for the EDC. I start to, establish relationships with some of these fabric manufacturers that have done this quick pivot and have started to ship me in fabric. So I've been able to work with someone like Scott Tesser from Precision Textiles, who was able to, started shipping us in fabric right away. So in talking to them, and we start to build on contract, we started making for the city, then other people started reaching out to me. So at that point, then I reached out to the Small Business Development Corporation. I got in touch with Gina Haydick, who helped me get listed with my NAICS codes and helped me find opportunities that might be available for city and state government. And that led me to federal, and then, ITAC was very instrumental. Raj Sharma, the Industrial Technology Assistance Corporation, really helped find me the right people. When that federal opportunity became available, he got me in touch with my local PTAC, and Edgar Hernandez was unbelievably helpful and supportive in really teaching me how to process, one of the bids.
And I assume you had never dealt with a federal bid prior to that. You hadn't had any RFPs.
That's correct.
And I'm assuming
No,
that's
I'm brand new. Brand new.
I would assume. How many gowns were you making for the city, or PPE equipment for the city, before you worked with the feds?
I think, they were coming at clips. So I'm having an opportunity to build, from 200,000 a week to 500,000 a week. And I kept, adding customers and pretty much putting everything I could get into machines, because every machine I could procure meant more jobs for more people. So I just kept, taking these orders and buying more equipment and getting more people to work, so that by the time the federal opportunity came along, I knew that I could generate a huge volume for them.
And how many how many gowns, PPE equipment are you making now a week?
2 million units a week.
Which to me seems extraordinary. I mean, I can't even fathom 2 million a week. And I'm assuming you bought a lot of new equipment. If capitalism works,
Yes.
equipment is supposed to rise in price when everybody wants it. Did the equipment rise in price?
Right. It did. And of course, at that time, I'm buying a few pieces at a time, and I'm paying air freight and, trying to fill containers and send them by boat and fill in by air. But, it's supply and demand. Everybody wanted the same equipment at the same time. But my long-term relationships there enabled me to maneuver quickly.
Can you give me an example of a piece of equipment and what happened to the price of it during this surge in demand?
Right. So 3,600 versus 1,800, 4,500. Like, there was a range. It was supply and demand, and then of course freight was a huge expense because we didn't have planes flying, so space on flights became more expensive, and I'd seen freight go, up to $18. It was everything was through the roof during the beginning stages of COVID.
How about the RFP from the government? Again, that was
Yes.
new to you. How much help did you have in responding to the RFP, which I'm assuming looked a lot like gobbledygook when you first read it?
It sure did. Multiple weekends of side-by-side computer, but really PTAC is there for you, and the resources are really there. Edgar was amazing and spent a lot of hours with me. Raj also. I couldn't have done it alone. It was really a huge team effort.
Is the fabric you're using for these gowns different from the fabric you ordinarily work with?
Yes, it is. So, this is non-woven laminate. This is really for medical. This is a medical industry. Scott's business does a lot of crossover in bedding and automobile. So he really did an unbelievable job pivoting his business back to this industry. I think he was doing something like 20,000 yards a week pre-pandemic to over 300,000 yards a day, 7 days a week.
Oh my God, that's like 20 times.
So, yeah, that's a huge testament to the pivot that, his business did to accommodate my business. And of course, I couldn't have done it without, without them.
And he has enough raw material. He gets enough raw material to make the fabric.
Yeah, the fiber. So they bring in the fiber from South Carolina. So, and then make the fabric and laminate it all there. It's really an unbelievable process.
It's amazing. So you had 50 people when you were doing your normal work. How many people do you have now?
Close to 1,000.
So you multiplied your staff by 20 times.
Right. Incredible.
What's it like controlling 1,000 people versus 50?
It's like all of it. It's a couple zeros on the end, and it's great. I mean, everybody's worked so hard and everybody's worked together, and it really took a village, and it was an amazing feat. I'm really grateful that we were all able to work together And, fashion has always done these quick pivots, right? Like if pleating is important this season, rhinestones are important next season. But you're talking about an entire industry of skilled people that are normally used to using sewing machines. You gave them a piece of ultrasonic welding technology and they took to it. It's an amazing, kudos to my incredible workforce and this incredible industry and talent pool that we have here in New York that was able to embrace this new technology and work together.
That interests me. Michelle, you had 50 people, you have 1,000. Where do these 950 people come from? And why is that talent available? What were they doing the day before this?
All right. Well, so, they were making clothes and no one's going to stores, no one's shopping, stores are hurting, manufacturers aren't making new items. So, we have an incredibly huge, vast, talented workforce in New York that's not working in their regular industry right now because we're not making clothes. Like regular fashion isn't happening. Pretty much, no shows for 2 seasons, no Met Gala, and regular fashion. It's very, very slow. I'm very concerned about keeping this going long enough to see regular fashion manufacturing return. That's the goal.
And do you think it will happen post-pandemic?
I hope so.
Are you
for all of us?
I mean, for the industry I'm talking now, is the industry reasonably price competitive with, let's say, Southeast Asia?
Well, there's only certain things that are made here, right? We're talking high-end designers, higher-end fashion, and a lot of product development happens here. I think it will return. I hope so. I believe so.
I want to go back now to your government contract.
Yes.
Are there special problems inherent in completing manufacturing PPE equipment, given the need for protection and durability, wearer's comfort? I assume that's a unique kind of a problem.
It is. The testing and all of the processes that were involved was, I had the time to learn it. It was fascinating. And, we weren't working on regular things. So it gave us a great window of time to learn a new thing, which really was fascinating. And we're very fortunate that VAR Test is right down the road from us. And we were able to run there and learn a lot about testing and seam technology and barriers and, viral barrier and a whole new industry. It's really fascinating.
You're learning a whole new business as you go along because
Yes.
You're not interested in viral testing prior to.
No.
And the government's putting, I assume, lots of restrictions, lots of testing. They're testing the durability. I assume they're testing the number of times a garment can be washed.
Yes, they are. And, we felt that, there should be a long-term solution. So we've been assuming all along that we want this to be part of our business in the future. So we've been working with an FDA consultant and we've been working on our 510K certification and ISO certifications and learning about everything and getting our factory and our facility and our testing up to where it should be so that it could be sustainable. We can offer a product post-pandemic without the EUA.
And how long did it take you to get to that point?
Well, I would say it took a good solid 6 months, but, I was busy with a few other things in the meantime. So, learning about the testing and all that was involved, that was a pretty fast ramp up. Just there's a lot of information available, and Vartes was very helpful, and Raj, I had a team of consultants guiding me along the way, so they were super helpful.
Can you give us a short tour through the first contract you got, how it happened? Because I'm assuming you had no connections. You don't have lobbyists in Washington.
I don't. Well, you're talking about my first contract with the city?
Well, how about
the federal? So the federal government, actually, Steve Murch at the DLA is unbelievable. They were super helpful and supportive. I'll tell you that at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday, when I had a question, I got an answer by 10:15. I really felt like they knew what I was doing already for New York City. They'd seen my PDMs. I really felt like they knew what I was capable of, and they helped me through the process. I really do feel like they were looking to give directly to manufacturers. So I feel like normally, I'm competing against big business, right? Like Hanes calls me after I win this award, to ask if they can help make gowns. This is like a completely foreign concept, but I really feel like the DLA was very supportive of small business.
Could a company like Hanes have been helpful to you?
Well, I mean, they're a behemoth. Whether or not they were actually manufacturing in-house or offering me fabrics, or I certainly learned so much about really the people that reached out afterwards. I didn't realize exactly who I was competing against, so it was kind of like blind faith, right? I'm buying all of these machines and preparing myself for this contract, but I didn't really know fully what I was up against. But they did a full audit prior to the award, really to check and make sure that I could do what I was saying I could do. And then they had an private external audit post-award. So I really feel like they did their due diligence, but did give me an opportunity.
Now, did you have a warehouse in New Jersey before this started?
Yes. So I had to, when I started making for the city, I started shipping, bigger volumes. So I didn't, of course, start with a warehouse, but as I'm sending, trucks and trucks a day, and it went from, a truck a day to several trucks a day to a box truck to a trailer. There's not a lot of space in Manhattan to store trailers worth of gowns. So that was something I did have to figure out quickly and early.
And is it the same warehouse you're using now for the federal government contract?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Let's talk about that for a second. When you
Sure.
get an order from the government, how long does it take between the time you get the order, you sign on, and the time you deliver gowns to Texas? I gather that's where it goes.
That is where it goes. That's correct. So to really get started, now I'm asking, Precision Textiles and Scott, I'm saying, okay, we got the award. Now all of a sudden I need a mountain of fabric. He's got to ramp up. So I would say from the very first order, within 2 weeks, we had gowns in Texas, but there was an approval process, a label approval process, box, carton, labels. There's special software to deliver to the government. Now you need to print a special sticker with a barcode that helps them receive those goods properly. But 2 weeks, if that sounds like a lot of time. Now we're down to really 4 days. So we've closed that gap between we get fabric till the gowns are leaving. Now it's about a 4-day turn, but it was 2 weeks in the beginning.
So it's 4 days from when you have the fabric in your factory.
Right.
How
So from when I'm receiving that fabric, so I receive the fabric, I have to cut it, weld it, bag it, box it to the warehouse, and then the truck is leaving. Now that's 4 days. But remember, it's not like it's happening in a regular work day. We're running trucks at night, picking up boxes back to the warehouse in the morning. It's pretty much, a 24-hour process at this point.
How many trucks a day are leaving?
5 trucks. 5 trucks a day, except Wednesday and Sunday.
And the exception for Wednesday and Sunday?
Wednesday, trucks arrive in Texas on Friday, so you pay a fee for the trucks to sit over the weekend. And Sunday, because my warehouse team needs a rest.
And these are 18-wheelers, semis?
That's correct. So 60 pallets in a truck without an inch to spare.
Wow. And I assume some of those gowns come back into the New York area from Austin.
I'd be very interested to know so I'm selling to the government. The government is supplying HHS. So HHS distributes, I think, wherever the need is.
Interesting. Now, during all this time, you're buying equipment, you're hiring people. There's a lag. I think I remember you telling me once that there's a lag of 30 days between the time the goods are delivered to Austin, Texas, and the time you get paid.
That's correct.
So you're financing an enormous amount, not only of receivables, but prepaid labor and equipment and all. How are you doing all this financing?
That's correct. So another giant reason SBDC was incredibly helpful to me, Leo Zhang. So now I get this contract. And the next question is exactly how do I finance it? So Leo and your entire team and Scott, they were extremely helpful in helping me with all of my research and putting it together and trying to help manage what would be the most cost-effective solution for financing.
Scott, you get this request. How do you respond on behalf of the Field Center?
So the request actually didn't come directly to me. Michelle had reached out to the Small Business Development Center that we house here in the Field Center. And she was routed to Leo Zhang, who's one of our amazing advisors. And he worked with Michelle to, as she mentioned, kind of put the paperwork together. There are, certain, documents that need to be filled out for women and minority-owned businesses in the city that the whole staff here is really well versed in. And just looking at the different options for, as you pointed out, how do you finance when you're pulling in 300,000 yards of fabric a day? How do you finance that with, a 30 to 40 day, lead time before reimbursement? So, we handle these sorts of inquiries often, certainly not at the scale that Michelle was looking to have, to address. But these are the types of things that the SBDC here at the center and elsewhere, this is what they do. Their sole focus is to help small businesses, though I'm not sure we can call Michelle's a small business anymore. But to help small businesses in the city, gain access to not only financing, but also, solve a host of other problems too. But in Michelle's case, it's focused around the financing piece.
And is the original financing now continuing the same way it did before, Michelle?
Yes.
I assume that's a continuing relationship.
I think so. I'm winding down with my original contract, so I'm waiting for maybe an additional release from the DLA, but I did take on a few additional contracts, so I'm then, carrying those also. So I took on a few contracts that other manufacturers that had gotten awards also were coming up short on. So I'm taking over. I took over 2 disposable, correct.
They just couldn't fulfill the demands?
Right.
And is there some kind of site where you go to see who needs gowns, who's requiring, who's got RFPs around? Is that public?
So yes, that's so the Small Business Development Corporation does have a site, and you put in your NAICS codes, and Gina was extremely helpful in setting up, and you can get a daily alert as to all sorts of things that could pertain to you. So now I'm aware of all of this federal contracting. So I've even been able to get an award for embroidery back to my, original core business, and working on a few other things. So yes, they're very helpful, the Small Business Development Corporation.
Are you still doing any of your original business? Your high fashion business?
Yes. Yes, we definitely are. We develop for all sorts of amazing New York brands, Coach, Tory Burch, Alexander Wang, all of my Ralph Lauren. Yes, we are developing for New York fashion.
And I'm assuming that your 10,000 feet on 36th Street is not manufacturing all these gowns, all this fabric. Where else are you manufacturing?
I have 3 locations in Brooklyn, and I've added an additional 10,000 square feet in 307 on 3 different floors. So I've taken over three additional spaces in 307 West 36, in addition to a few other spaces in 327.
And what happens at some point, I hope, when the pandemic ends? Tell me about what happens to your business.
Well, I'm hoping that we can still maintain some PPE manufacturing. I believe that we've got a very cost-effective solution, and I feel like we can maintain something domestically. And I hope regular fashion does come back. And I also hope that now this newfound business that I found in government contracting, that I could do other things for them. Now that they've seen what I have been able to do, they've reached out to me already about additional opportunities within the manufacturing sector.
And what happens to all the space you have, or the 1,000 employees? Because I assume the business has to shrink a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I think that's upon me. That's the weight on my shoulders now, right? Keeping all of these people employed. And, I'm 6 weeks into wrapping up the contracts that we have. So I'm definitely looking for new opportunities for manufacturing, not only PPE, but other items.
I'm assuming the government has an endless list of things it needs.
They really do. It's really unbelievable. And their website of all different things and that they need and purchase, they are the largest purchaser. And yes, they do have a bottomless end. So as a manufacturer, there are other opportunities. And I would encourage anyone in manufacturing to learn about it.
And you're working on a fixed price contract?
Yes, we are.
So all the risk is on you.
Yes.
I'm interested, how did that weigh on you when you took this first contract and you realized you'd have to manufacture so many millions of gowns, PPE equipment, you had this fixed cost, and you're saying to yourself, what if? Right.
I mean, well, first of all, it's a village. There's, the fabric cost, the labor cost, your box, your cuff, your bag cost, your trucking cost. You have to, be careful and safe, just like with all costing in business, but this is a little bit easier than my regular business, which is all labor. And, you know, you think you can estimate what something costs, but with this, you have to really be certain because it's millions of them. So you do have to be careful.
As you pointed out at the beginning of our conversation, there's just more zeros. So if you make a mistake,
Yeah.
there's more zeros.
Exactly. They work both ways.
Work both ways. Tell me about the worst things that happened to you during this. What were the surprises?
I mean, no worse thing, right? This is amazing. You're, you know, giving people jobs. You're scared, you know, can you allow for enough space for people to work in a safe environment, right? We're saying, would you like to come back to work? We have a job for you. Can you keep everyone healthy? Can you make sure you take enough precautions to make sure people are not touching the same things, working too close, eating lunch at the same time, taking a mask off with someone else in the same space? But that's something I think all of us as a whole, we're learning together. So I think that's been a big challenge for everyone. You know, machine operators are used to working side by side. Now all of a sudden I have to space each machine out and spread each machine out so that each person has, you know, 6 feet of safe space. So I think that's something we all learn together as a country.
Or we
trying to
haven't
figure
learned.
that all out. Right. Or we haven't, right? Unfortunately.
Did you have to hire a safety expert to look at the factory floor and say, don't do this, do this?
I mean, so New York City was great with giving us guidelines, and, you know, it was a lot of research and learning on the fly. All of a sudden, you know, now the first person in is armed with a thermometer and checking temperatures as people walked in. So we all learned a new trick through this. I think everybody, and we've been very safe and also very lucky. So we haven't had any outbreak, which I've heard other factories in the Midwest and one I work very closely with and make a lot of things with, they've been totally shut down. They do government contracting and they're, you know, they're in a bad way. So I just think it takes a little bit of diligence and luck.
As I've had an experience with one business, they made one mistake and they had a calamity. Just one single mistake.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Can you talk about, we've got another couple of minutes. Are you now the largest manufacturer of PPE equipment in New York?
That's what they say. That's what they say. You know, honestly, I've just kept my head down. I'm trying not to worry about what everyone else is doing. I'm trying to, you know, exceed their expectations on this contract. This wasn't like, you know, a get-rich-quick scheme. This was give as many people jobs as I possibly can and try to sustain this industry that's been very good to me, and just try to keep as many people working and employed as I could until our regular industry returns.
Amazing. How many shifts are you working now?
We were working 3, we're down to 2 now. With a 1 hour, we have a 1 hour air out in between.
So that's a lot of people that are working that wouldn't ordinarily be working.
Yes, it is. It's really amazing. And what the DLA does in supporting manufacturing and domestic industry is incredible. You know, everything from the fiber that my cuffs are made from is traceable to the United States. Everything, my bag that my gowns are packed in. They really make a huge effort to supporting, our economy with product and domestic product. It's an amazing thing.
Government ran short of all kinds of equipment during this pandemic, everything from ventilators to PPE equipment, all the rest. Do you think, or do you have reason to believe governments learned a lesson that it pays to have manufacturers in New York in not New York, in the United States, and short supply chains?
I hope so. I hope that this doesn't fall on deaf ears. Cuomo's state of the address, I think it was yesterday,
Right.
is, he really is. I think people are paying attention to this. And I think that our federal government has always had this interest, right? Keeping manufacturing here. They make a huge effort to make all of our military uniforms, anything that the government needs. They want to first give the United States manufacturers an opportunity. Will other people pay attention? Will the lesson have been learned? I hope that the lesson is learned before it's lost.
And in your mind, are the costs close enough so that the value of the supply chain makes it easily worthwhile?
I think we're very, very close, if not on the mark. If I look at what some of the bigger manufacturers, the Medlines, the Cardinal Health of the world are selling, we're very cost competitive. And I think we have an amazing product made here, made in New York. And I think it's important that it's kept.
And can you detect any quality differentials between your product and what comes, let's say, from China?
Well, I think we offer a very cost competitive and great product. As far as what comes in from China, I'm not really, I've been focusing on domestic, so I'm not really 100% familiar with what people have been getting, but I think they've been talking about, whether or not the resellers or the people involved in that industry, I mean, we all heard about it, right? It was on TV every day where they were promised a shipment of gowns and they were getting masks, or they needed masks and they didn't get the right item. So whether or not that's really a product or that was a supply chain issue or a reseller issue, but I think it's important that people pay attention and that we can solve our own problems should the need arise.
And right now, I'm curious, what is your relationship with your employees who are suddenly working maybe extra hours, who would not have been working prior to this, prior to your success?
I mean, my people are amazing, and they're my work family, and I spend more time with them than my home family. And they've stood by me through, countless fashion emergencies and the night before shows that someone has a great idea. So I'm just grateful that I've been able to make a pivot and be able to keep everybody employed, and everybody that wanted to work has been able to work. And I don't think that's happened in a lot of industries. So I'm just grateful that we've been able to maintain our people.
And I'm assuming the same thing is true with the various landlords you have, the various factories who would have had empty buildings were it not for you.
Right.
And I'm sure that's true of your suppliers as well, because
it's, unbelievable. So many people have, been able to hire more people. We've built jobs, and that's important. People that wouldn't have been working were working and are part of a greater good, right? We're solving a problem. So not only, are people working, but we're being part of the greater good, and it feels good to help other people. It's different than regular clothing or fashion. We're actually helping someone feels good.
It has to be enormously satisfying to you.
Absolutely. Incredible.
Some doctor or some nurse in a hospital has a good piece of equipment to wear that's protective,
Right. Rather than a garbage bag.
which we
Absolutely.
saw some of. Scott, you have any?
Yes, we did.
I'm sure. Scott, have you anything you want to add to this, or any questions you have?
You know, the story is obviously it's amazing, and as I'm listening to the story, and I've heard it before, but hearing it again, I'm just reminded of how Michelle's journey really epitomizes so many of the things that we teach our students. You know, from you know, dealing with environmental shocks to you know, engaging in strategies based on necessity and new opportunities, building networks, learning, gathering resources, the risk associated with that, the uncertainty about the future, the value of government institutions that are really designed to help businesses like Michelle's, and the benefits that entrepreneurship in general provides, as Michelle pointed out just towards the end, not only, you know, the job creation piece of it, but also the social good that can come from entrepreneurial activity. So, you know, as I was making notes as she was talking, and almost at every turn, it was a, you know, a great manifestation of the types of things that we try to instill in our students about, you know, the fact that this is a messy process. It's not linear. As Michelle likely could attest, this is not something that anybody could have planned out, you know, on day one, on March 12th, when the world seemed to shut down. But you know, through a trial and error process, through a learning process, and just the willingness to adapt to change, as opposed to you know, putting a foot in the ground and saying, no, I'm a high-end fashion manufacturer, and that's what I'm going to be. Those are the reasons I think Michelle was able to succeed in a time when many others didn't, because of the willingness to change, and the willingness to learn, and the willingness to take on a little bit of risk, even though it probably seemed pretty daunting at times, and working with partners to succeed, because nobody does it on their own. And as Michelle pointed out, that, you know, the many names that she mentioned in her story, you know, is really a testament to the fact that entrepreneurs, you know, need help, and need partners to succeed. And you know, this is the type of thing we oftentimes hear about, the lone wolf entrepreneur who succeeds on her own, and steps on the throats of everybody else in their way, but that's generally not the way it works. And I think that's what I like most about the story is you know, the humility of Michelle through the process, and the fact that by engaging in business that way, you can be successful and do good for society and do good for those who work for you. So, so I think it's a great case study, and will be a good example to use in our classes with our students, because I think they have a lot to learn from folks like Michelle.
I definitely think one of our professors should write this up as a case study, business case study. It has so many ramifications. It would be brilliant. Michelle, one other thing that I'm really happy about is when I hear you talk about government agencies and being so helpful. It's so frequent now to hear government disparaged in every other sentence. And it's nice to realize that government is composed of people like us, and they want to succeed and they want to help people. And this constant disparagement of government, I find very offensive.
Yeah, it's not at all my experience. Everyone was so supportive and so helpful and so encouraging, and really, really helpful along the process. Like I just couldn't have done it without them. And they took an enormous chance on me. I think it was an educated, you know, an educated chance, but I think they were incredibly supportive.
It's funny, I guess when the story is told, it will be told as an overnight success, and somebody will forget you spent 30 years in the business building relationships and building credibility and building reputation and knowledge, and it was not an overnight success. It was a 30
Right.
years.
Well, it really was a village, and a lot of amazing people helped me, that's for sure.
Gwen, do you have
Yeah.
anything to add from our audience?
There are quite a few questions in the audience. I hated to interrupt because the conversation was really very compelling. I'd like to turn to Michelle and ask her, you were in a low volume, high fashion industry. You pivoted to very high volume PPE gowns. Michelle, what do you feel are some of the most important takeaways overall from your experience?
My most important takeaway, I would say, is the base of the manufacturing, like the Scott Tesser and the precision textiles, of the United States, the people that actually make the fabric. I think it's really important that we pay attention to that industry and keep those options and that industry going in the United States, because I think that technology and that industry, once it's lost, it's going to be very difficult to regain.
Do you feel that this goes beyond just your particular industry, or is something of broader significance for U.S. manufacturing as a whole?
No, I think it's definitely U.S. manufacturing as a whole. I think we were very quick to push certain jobs that we thought were beneath us, maybe offshore. But I think keeping a certain amount of industry here and maintaining a supply chain across all different industries is important. It's important to be able to protect our own doctors and nurses and to be able to make things that we need.
We are very short on time, but I'd like to turn to you, Scott. You already touched on this to an extent, but what lessons would you draw from Michelle's experience and success that are most important for Baruch students to learn?
Yeah, so I think the most interesting part of the story is that Michelle didn't get into this to make gowns, right? She didn't start 30 years ago because making hospital gowns was her life's passion, and now in many ways it is. And so what I would encourage, our students and all aspiring entrepreneurs to think about is that we all have our passion, the thing that we want to do in life, and maybe the product or idea that we want to found a company on. But we have to take a step back sometimes and reassess whether or not that is the right way to go. Again, we hear stories of how people forge on and make things work, and sometimes the Elon Musks and the Steve Jobs of the world tend to blind us a bit from the realities of how most businesses evolve over time. And it's by going where the market is. And in Michelle's case, the market was in gowns. It wasn't in high-end fashion. Certainly she could have stuck to her original idea for which she founded the company and struggled on making high-end fashion in very low volumes, even lower because nobody was buying that sort of product. But she looked where the market was and where the opportunity was, and in the process was able to not only keep her business alive, which is the important thing, in the hopes that high-end fashion comes back stronger than ever, then that'll be a wonderful turn. But if not, she's created a new business out of the old, and by pivoting in the ways that she described, she has brought valuable products to our frontline workers, and she's brought jobs to people in need. And the outcomes that we heard her describe about how meaningful the work is, it's now less about the product and more about the process. And so the point here is that we don't know where these things are going to go, and as I mentioned before, we can't plan these things out. And if our students and entrepreneurs in general are open to change and being, and are willing to, listen to the market and work with others, I think they can achieve success. And it may look very different than what they had first imagined, but oftentimes we don't quite know what success is until we've gotten there. And I would say that Michelle is probably more successful because of the pandemic and the way she responded, then maybe she would have been in the absence of it. And so, you know, I applaud her courage and her willingness to, you know, to support the community and in the ways that she did.
Scott, there was a question here from the audience that refers to government contracting. And the perception from many is that working with the federal government is bad for business because of their regulations and the tax regulations. But obviously, Michelle has been very successful with it. What general sources of information would you guide students to who are to be aware of these opportunities and to learn about what is involved in dealing with contracting? And is this something you at the Field Center are prepare students to deal with?
Yeah, so, you know, dealing with the government in some ways is like dealing with Costco or Walmart or some of these, you know, big box retailers. It always sounds good, but there are, as Michelle learned, there are some hurdles involved. Additional inspections, certain customizations, including the barcode issue that Michelle mentioned before. And so dealing with big, powerful buyers is never easy. It provides a lot of benefits because quantities tend to be larger, but margins tend to be smaller, and the demands they place on you are very difficult. We provide some of the assistance that students would need, or entrepreneurs in general would need if they're looking at dealing with customers like this. So as I mentioned before, our Small Business Development Center, with our advisors, the one that Michelle worked with, Leo Zhang, as well as Stephanie Beshara, Ben Cox, and Ulash Nefsi. They do a wonderful job helping entrepreneurs, whether they have a small business that they're running currently or thinking about it, and thinking about contracts and government grants and things of that nature. They're well versed in those areas and help, you know, almost 1,000 entrepreneurs a year with questions like this. So yeah, I think that would be a great first stop. And you can visit the website that I think Matthew LePere put up before, and we can schedule a virtual session right away. But these are things that we do deal with, that we do have some expertise in, and that are very real issues, particularly now that the government you know, seems to be more invested in certain industries.
I have to add one thing, Scott. Larry Field was a dear friend of mine. He would have been very proud to hear you say all these things.
Well, he was a good inspiration for all of us, and we can only hope to impact the world in the ways Larry did.
Sure was.
Thank you, Scott. And Larry, we are coming to the close of the hour, but just as a final question, as we listened to Michelle, we heard the story of an entrepreneur who is flexible, innovative, and willing to strike out in new ways. What in her story do you personally find most compelling?
I think her flexibility, the ability that she had, that she demonstrated, to pivot away from what she was doing to something almost completely different. She had the breadth of thinking to realize she had an ability to manufacture things. The country needed things, and she simply pivoted away from what she was doing to what needed to be done. I think that's a remarkable story.
Well, I think all of us think that's a remarkable story. We want to thank you, Michelle Feinberg, Scott Newbert, Larry Zicklin, for a really, really fun and interesting webinar. I'm very happy to announce that our next webinar will be February, or the second Tuesday in February. The guest will be Mr. Shai Weiss. He is CEO of Virgin Atlantic. And the session will be Virgin Atlantic before, during, and after the pandemic. So please plan on joining us then. And again, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
So much. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care.